Hello and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to look at the proposed minimum requirement from the new release of 11-bit Studio, the ALTERS. A nicely done, well-written game on quite old hardware. The proposed minimum requirement go as follows: AMD Ryzen 5 1600 or i7 6700, 16GB of RAM, Radeon RX 570 or GTX 1060 or Intel Arc A570. I don't know where this GPU exists, but maybe this is a B570. I'm not sure where this A570 comes from, but anyway, welcome to Response PC. I'm Dunk, let's game on. Starting off with the Intel CPU, the i7 67K variant, I don't have the non-K, 16GB of RAM, and the GTX 1060 6GB variant. But for some reason, when you start the game, you get a warning saying that the GPU is underperforming and may cause crashes. I have the latest driver for this GPU, so I'm not sure what's going on right there. But regardless of the warning, you just click OK and you continue to play. So we are at the low presets at 1080p with the FSR balance. For some reason, by default, you will put the FSR performance, so check that up, because even at the balance, you get an average of 61, 62 FPS. It is highly playable. You don't even need that much FPS for this kind of game. GPU is pegged at 100% using 5GB of VRAM out of 6. CPU-wise, we are at 30 to 40% of utilization. And for the RAM, we are at 10 to 11GB of RAM out of 16. Frame time frame graph is super smooth, so this is highly playable. So the target, if it were 60 FPS, they have reached. Switching to the AMD side of the proposed minimum requirement, we have the AMD Ryzen 5 1600, 16GB of RAM, and the RX 570 4GB variant. There's no 6GB to my knowledge. There's an 8GB variant. I guess this should have been the 8GB variant, but the equivalent to the 1060 6GB is the RX 580, not the RX 570. And it shows, because at 1080p, you need to have FSR at performance to have 50 FPS. So you get the blurry of the upscaling of performance instead of balance, and you have less FPS than the 1060. But for this kind of game, I'd rather have better visual than better FPS. The GPU was in the high 90s, not even pegged at 1% for some reason, using 3.9GB of VRAM out of 4. CPU usage, we are in the mid-20s, and we're using 12GB of RAM. And finally, for the Intel GPU, I had to use the AMD CPU, Ryzen 5 1600, because the i7 6700K does not support resizable bar, and that would be an issue. My AMD motherboard does support resizable bar, so we're going to test the A380, because the A570, I don't know where this comes from, but does not exist beside the mobile version. I think there's a A570 mobile. But the equivalent to the GTX 1060 6GB variant is the Intel Arc A380 6GB also. We're still at 1080p, lowest settings, but now we're using XeSS Ultra quality, and we get an average of exactly 60 FPS. GPU pegged at 99% using 5.6GB of VRAM out of 6. CPU still in the mid-20s, and we're using 10GB of memory. We get some drop in FPS when it was more heavily graphically in the mid-40s, but also climb in the mid-70s. So the FPS was a bit unstable, but it was consistent. So a win, I guess. In conclusion, what did we learn is that you're going to need any kind of upscaling to reach your 60 FPS. Doesn't matter if it's NVIDIA, Intel or AMD. The proposed CPU, the i7 67 or the Ryzen 5 1600, are too powerful to be the minimum requirement, the real minimum requirement, I mean. GTX 1060 6GB, perfect for 60 FPS. The RX 570, it should be the A580. That's a mistake, or didn't test properly. And for the A570, I don't even know where this come from. It should be the A380. And that's all I have to say for the ALTERS. Thanks to everyone watching. See you in the next one, and subscribe.